president and publisher of the Lexington Herald-Leader from 2011 to 2018, and previously held the same role at the Tri-City Herald in Washington State. He began his career in circulation at the News and Observer in Raleigh, North Carolina in 1984, rising through the ranks to become vice president of circulation. Along the way, he has held senior leadership positions at newspapers in Alabama, Illinois, and Tennessee. Rufus holds a bachelor's degree in business management and economics from South Carolina State University, as well as an honorary doctor of laws from the University of the Cumberlands. His commitment to service extends well beyond the newsroom. He currently chairs the Stars and Stripes Publishers National Advisory Board and serves on several other boards, including the Muhammad Ali Center, the University of the Cumberlands, the University of Kentucky's College of Communications and Information, and the Southern Newspaper Publishers Association Foundation. Rufus has been a kind of a constant presence on the speaking circuit lately, and it's been a pleasure to get to know him through some volunteer work that I've done with the center. And I'm confident that you'll find his presentation today considered and engaging. Please welcome Rufus Friday.
Thank you, Layne. I greatly appreciate it. And good morning to everyone. And I also want to thank Steve Herman and also Jerry Jordan and the Jordan Center for bringing this conversation to Oxford. I want to start off by acknowledging something before I really get started. You just heard from Brian Stelter, and later this morning you heard from Kathy Keeley and also Vivian Walker. That's really a formidable lineup, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But here's what I want you to know about my place in this program. Brian told you what's wrong from a media critic's viewpoint. Kathy and Vivian, they'll tell you what we can all learn. As Layne mentioned in the introduction, I'm a longtime former publisher and news executive. Serving as a newspaper publisher was the last job I held before this one, in a career that has shaped the same belief that brought all of you here today, that a free and trustworthy press is not optional in a democracy. It's a requirement. And I want to be clear about something before I go even further. You know, I'm aware that there's been commentary, including on social media, about today's format and the perspectives by some of the speakers that are in parts of the program here. Some of that commentary has raised concerns about polarization and about whether a conversation like this one can truly be nonpartisan. You know, I understand those concerns, but what I want to tell you exactly where I stand, and more importantly, exactly what the Center for Integrity in News Reporting stands for. You see, we're not a media criticism organization. We're not here to assign blame. We're not aligned with any political party, any ideology, any movement, left, right, or center. In fact, the very core of what we advocate is a return to the principle that opinion and advocacy have no place in the foundation of news reporting. Impartiality and objectivity, they're not relics. They're not outdated ideals. They are the load-bearing walls of a press that the public can actually trust. You see, our mission is to champion that standard and to help news organizations publicly commit to the values that make it possible. You see, we don't believe journalism's problem is partisanship. We believe it's structural, and structural problems require structural solutions. Not more critics, but more champions. We're not here to critique anyone in this room or on this program. I'm here to inform, to educate, and to advocate for the kind of journalism that serves every American, regardless of who they voted for. That's what this organization is. And I'm here to tell you what we're rebuilding at the Center for Integrity in News Reporting. And I want to spend some time talking with you also about trust. But I do want to begin by acknowledging someone who is actually in this room with us today. Walter Hussman Jr. is here. Some of you may know Walter as the retired publisher of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette and head of Waco Media's 11 news organizations. And he's one of the most consequential figures in American regional journalism over the past 40 years. But what brought him to found the Center for Integrity in News Reporting two years ago is a story worth telling. You see, in 2017, Walter was overseas and watching a CNN promotional spot. In it, a promotional anchor said they didn't believe in the false equivalency of giving both sides of a story. That moment stopped him. A major network news figure had just told an audience on purpose that it was acceptable to abandon the foundational principle of impartial news reporting. Well, Walter did what any publisher would do. He came back home, drafted a clear statement of core journalistic values, and he ran it consistently in each of the Waco's newspapers. It was a public declaration of what those newsrooms stand for and why it matters. And then he asked a harder question. What if we could take that commitment beyond one company? What if we could help rebuild it across the entire profession? He often returns to a standard that was set by Adolph Ox, the 19th century publisher of the New York Times, which stated to give the news impartially without fear or favor. That standard, Walter says, fueled the rise of credible journalism in the 20th century. And it can serve as the foundation for trust again. Walter asked a question that has become the foundation of everything we do at the Center for Integrity in News Reporting. You see, we may not win over every critic, but he said, what if we could just get 5, 10, 15% of Americans to believe again in fair, objective, impartial news reporting? Wouldn't that be worth it? When Walter asked me to lead the organization, I immediately said yes, that I want to come alongside and help. That question, 5 to 15%, is not a modest ambition disguised as humility. It's a serious calculation about what is actually achievable and what would actually be needed to move the needle for democracy. You see, if you could shift 15% of the American public back to believing in objective journalism, you'd change the political and civic landscape of this country. Walter, thank you for being here today. And also, thank you for having that conviction to act when most people back then would have just changed the channel. This is what we're trying to do. So let's start with where we actually are today. Should advance the slide. There we go, good. Trust in American news media is at its lowest point in 50 years. And this is just not an opinion. It's a reality backed by data that none of us in this room can afford to look away from. You see, since the early 1970s, Gallup has tracked public confidence in American institutions like Congress, the Supreme Court, the military, law enforcement, and news media. Historically, Congress has ranked as the least trusted institution in the country. But for the first time ever, the news media has taken that spot. In 1976, 72% of Americans trusted the media. But you fast forward to the Gallup poll that was just released in September of last year, that number has fallen to 28%. But here's another number that should stop all of us cold. 36% of Americans now say they have no trust in the media at all. Not a little trust, not some trust, none. For the first time in recorded history of the poll, complete distrust outweighs trust. And it's worse here than anywhere else. There you go. Go back one. There we go, good. The Reuters Institute for the Survey of Journalism surveyed 92,000 people across 46 countries back in 2020. And they just asked a simple question. Do you trust the media in your country? Well, the United States ranked dead last. Only 29% expressed trust. That's among 46 nations, dead last. And here at home, the problem is just not that fewer people trust the news. It's that we just can't even agree on which news is trustworthy. According to the Pew Research Center's June 2025 survey, 58% of Americans say they distrust CNN, while 58% of Republicans say they distrust it. The inverse is true for Fox News. 56% of Republicans trust it, but 64% of Democrats distrust it. And only a handful of national outlets, PBS, the Associated Press, and the Wall Street Journal, are trusted by even a third of the public across the political spectrum. You see, I share these numbers not to depress you. I share them because the scale of the problem determines the size of the response that's going to be needed. The erosion of trust in journalism just didn't happen overnight. And it didn't happen only for one reason. There are four main contributing factors that contributed to it, and I want to be direct about all of them, including the ones that might make some folks in the room a little uncomfortable to hear. First, the nature of bias. Humans naturally seek out the information that confirms what they already believe. And that's understandable in daily life, but it should never dictate journalism. But over the past 3 decades, some journalists and also news organizations have blurred the line between objective news reporting and opinion, sometimes without realizing it, sometimes deliberately. The rise of 24/7 cable news and later social media. These platforms created economic incentives for speed, for outrage, and commentary over verification. Cable news became panels of experts opining on the news rather than reporting on it. Social media gave everyone the ability to post nearly anything, anytime, and often anonymously. And those platforms were filled with vitriol, and unverified information followed. A shift in journalism, education, and hiring. Traditional news organizations used to recruit the best reporters from strong local newsrooms. Now, digital influencers are replacing trained journalists. Thousands of reporting and editing jobs have been cut. Local beats are disappearing. You see, when communities aren't covered thoroughly, people feel ignored. And that loss of connection, it breeds mistrust. And fourth, and this is one I want to spend a little bit of time on because we are in a room here full of people who have thought hard and long about this. That debate inside journalism education itself. In 2023, the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State published a report called Beyond Objectivity. It surveyed 75 editors, mostly digital editors, and found the majority advocating to abandon objectivity in news reporting. Now, I disagree with that conclusion fairly strongly. But before I tell you why, I want to say something that I don't think gets said enough by people on my side of this discussion. Some of the frustrations driving that report are legitimate. False balance, such as treating fringe scientific positions as equivalent to consensus, is not objectivity. It's a failure of judgment dressed up as fairness. The failure of many mainstream newsrooms to adequately cover communities of color, working class communities, rural communities. That's not objectivity. It's a coverage gap that drove people away from real journalism. And yes, the word objectivity has sometimes been used as a shield to avoid covering those difficult stories, to protect institutional relationships, to stay comfortable. That's not objectivity either. You know, Marty Barron, who ran the Washington Post through some of the most consequential journalism of the last generation, he said it plainly, and I'll quote him. He said, you know, we want objective judges, objective doctors, objective scientists. It's natural to expect objective journalists too. And Walter Cronkite, the man whose name is on Arizona State University's journalism school, he said that back then, objective journalism and an opinion column are about as similar as the Bible and Playboy magazine. You know, the profession doesn't need to abandon the standard. It needs to live up to it. Let me give you a real world example of why this isn't theoretical for me. You see, in addition to my work at the Center for Integrity in News Reporting, I also serve as the chair for the National Publishers Advisory Board for Stars and Stripes. It's an independent newspaper that has served members of the U.S. military and their families for generations. Late last year at the Stars and Stripes press facility at Camp Humphreys in South Korea, which is the largest U.S. military installation overseas, the staff unveiled this 8 by 10-foot mural on their wall at their news facility. You know, the words are simple and unmistakable: credibility, impartiality, truth-telling, balance, accountability. You know, those are not marketing slogans. They are a compact with readers who are far away from home, often in harm's way, who depend on accurate, independent information. Earlier this year, the Pentagon signaled it was going to refocus Stars and Stripes away from editorial independence, proposing to remove wire service content and have a significant portion of its content provided by the Pentagon itself. That is what it looks like when journalism is shaped to please authority rather than to inform readers. And here's what made Stars and Stripes different. They had already drawn the line in writing, publicly. Stars and Stripes adopted and publicly displayed a clear statement of core journalistic values, drawing a clear, visible line between news and opinion, making their commitments explicit to every reader and every soldier who picked up the paper or read it online. You see, you cannot defend what you haven't named. Also, at the Center for Integrity in News Reporting, we have many priorities, but our single largest is this is advocating for news organizations all over the country to adopt and, more importantly, publicly promote a statement of core journalistic values. You can look at here on the screen what some of these newsrooms on this slide have done partnering with us. On the far right, like the Bangor Daily News, their statement, "Our only agenda is the truth. We follow the facts wherever they take us. We're not aligned with a political party. We are accountable." That's not a press release. That's a contract. And you see, and when you publish a contract publicly, your readers can know how to hold you to it, which is exactly the point. You know, this session also for today promised you a blueprint for rebuilding trust. So let me give you one. These are things that newsrooms, publishers, and also journalists can do. Draw the line publicly. Adopt a statement of core journalistic values and put it where your readers can see it every day. Prominently on your website's homepage, in your print masthead, on page A2, and at the top of a TV broadcast. Because readers deserve to know what you stand for before they can decide whether to trust you. If you stand for objectivity and fairness and independence in news reporting, we advocate that you say so. Put your name on it, and then be held accountable to your stated core journalistic values. Make the separation between news and opinion very visible, not just to yourselves, but to your readers. Label opinion and commentary as opinion and commentary. Label news as news. But make it clear in your design, your packaging, your digital presentation. When that line blurs in your reader's perception, there are no internal standards policies to repair the damage. You see, the average reader who doesn't have a journalism degree or news reporting experience, they can't see your internal standards policy. They really can only see what you publish. These steps are not complicated. They are not expensive. They require will, not a budget. I also want to acknowledge something happening here today that I think is significant. It's been talked about earlier. This symposium is also giving birth to an Oxford Declaration of Journalistic Integrity and Public Trust. It's a framework that's codifying many of the same principles for the information ecosystem broadly. I also had the opportunity to offer a little bit of perspective on that document, and I'm encouraged by what I've seen. It supports much of what we support at the Center for Integrity in News Reporting, making that separation between news and opinion visible, not just to yourselves, but to your readers. Also at the center, we're trying to make this case not just in speeches like this, but with resources. For the past 2 years, we presented national awards in Washington, D.C. with cash prizes of $25,000 per category, which is more than what the Pulitzer pays out, to reporters who demonstrate objectivity and impartial news reporting. This year, we have 6 categories: print, broadcast, cable, digital, White House correspondence, and a new category, investigative news reporting. In our first year, we had 102 journalists entered. Last year, 127. And this past cycle, 397 entries, a 213% increase in just 1 year. That tells me something. Working journalists, they're hungry for this kind of recognition. The appetite is there. Also, starting this year, we're also taking our work beyond national recognition and bringing it directly into area state press associations around the country. Thanks to a 3-year, $210,000 grant from the Southern Newspaper Publishers Association Foundation, we're launching $5,000 Integrity and Journalism Awards across 14 of the southeastern states. And I'm also thrilled to share that the state awards are being expanded even further. With an additional 3-year grant from the Stanton Foundation, we've launched $5,000 Integrity and Journalism Awards in the 6 New England states as well. And just last month, we had a donor to come up to us and reach out and said that they wanted us to support Ohio. That brings us to 21 states, 21 state-level awards that will recognize and celebrate the best example of impartial and objective news reporting. And in most of these states, it will be the largest single prize tied to any news contest category. But you know, the bigger point is not the check. It's what we at the center are choosing to honor. We're saying that impartial, objective news reporting is worthy of recognition. Because our hope is simple. When a reporter produces a story that checks every box for fairness, impartiality, accuracy, and objectivity, they just shouldn't get a pat on the back. They should stand on a stage in front of their peers and be honored for the work that builds and rebuilds trust in their community. Also, one of the things that we like about our awards is that there's no entry fee. There are no nominations required. Journalists and editors can enter directly into our contest. And if you want to know more about it, just go to our site, cfinr.org, to find out more on it. We're also taking our award winners from our contest directly into the journalism classroom schools all over the country, with 23 confirmed partner schools from the University of Missouri, USC's School of Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism, to Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism. Here you can see some of the other recent campus visits that have occurred and that the award-winning journalists have been meeting with those students. These journalists, they sit down with students. They talk candidly about what it actually takes to report impartially on hard stories. Not the theory of it, but the daily grind and discipline of it. You know, the president of the University of Maryland told me when I met with him that he hoped that our work would, and I'll quote him, change the future Gallup polls on the public's perception of the media. That's exactly the long game we're playing at the center. You know, finally, I wanted to speak directly to the students that may be in the room here. You know, you're entering a profession that has a trust problem. I want to be honest about that. The Gallup numbers, they're real. The Reuters ranking is real. The skepticism that you will encounter from readers and viewers is real. But here's also what's real. The public hasn't given up on good, objective, impartial news reporting and journalism. What you do, the choices you make about how to report, what to include, how to present, and what values you will publicly defend, those choices accumulate. I want to leave you with a commitment to carry out also in this room. Never compromise. Cover your community through the objective method and impartially. You see, it takes time to rebuild trust. One headline at a time, one correction at a time that's done quickly and with humility. One fair story at a time. You know, Margaret Sullivan, writing in the Columbia Journalism Review last year, said it clearly. And I'll quote her. We just can't continue to wring our hands about lost trust. We have to build it back from the ground up by owning our mistakes, separating facts from spin, and listening more than we talk. That's a call for doing the actual work. You see, a trustworthy press isn't a luxury in a democracy. It's a requirement. Not our business models, not our platforms, not even our journalism. You see, none of it works if the public doesn't trust us. And you know, regaining that trust, Lord knows it's not Washington's job. It's not Gallup's job. It's not Facebook's job as well. It's our job. Steve, Jerry, on behalf of the Center for Integrity in News Reporting, we want to thank you for giving us some time today to speak with this group. One of the things that we are working on now, we're looking to try to get some foundation support to add a seventh category, and that seventh category ideally would be for us to have an award that we can give to the college newspapers as well.
Fantastic.
And Layne, if I may acknowledge that I'd love to bring our board chair up on stage as well, Walter Husman, to answer some questions as well. So Walter, I'm putting you on the spot here, and I'm pretty sure I'll get. I mean, the reason that I'm here is because of Walter and also the commitment that he has made to regaining and rebuilding the public's trust. And Walter has one heck of a story that I completely admire as well. So there may be some reason why I wanted to bring Walter on stage is there may be questions that I think that he may be better fit to answer.
Very good. First up, Wes.
Wes Muller again. Rufus, we spoke a little bit about this previously, but can you talk to us about educating young people about journalism specifically at the grade school and high school levels?
Yeah, we did talk about that, Wes. I know that last night we mentioned that there, I don't know if you've seen us, 60 Minutes did a segment a couple of years ago, and it was a segment on being able to get the citizens, the young individuals, to understand and learn at an early age the importance of ethics, also the importance of understanding how to pick up on news that may not be misinformed or incorrect. And they start at the third grade level in elementary, and it's a requirement. And by the time these individuals get to junior high and high school, they are really adept at understanding and being able to ferret out what's correct information, what's misinformation as well. And I mean, it's something that I think is a model that we in this country should be looking at as well. But then again, I mean, like I said, for ideally, we're hoping that we can expand our center at some point in time to where even having a high school level award that we reward high school students that are working for their high school newspaper or website to be recognized for impartial and objective reporting that they're doing at the high school level as well. I didn't know, Walter, if you had any other comments that you would like to add.
I would like to add something. I'm John Faris. I'm an attorney here in North Mississippi. For 47 years, I've been dedicated to educating high school students about the news and what the real world is outside those doors. Because remember, after their senior year, that's the last time a lot of them will ever be educated. Guess what? In 47 years, the first question I ask every year for every class: have you ever watched a news program? 47 years, zero. Have you ever read a newspaper? 47 years, a zero. Have you ever listened to a newscast on the radio? 47 years, hundreds of students, zero. The failure is not in believing in the journal of news, but get the people to understand what it's about early enough. Every day I required every single student to bring one news report to the class. I don't care where it came from. I don't care how silly it was. I want you to be able to stand up in front of the class and tell them, I read this, I heard this, I saw this. It got to the point, they were all afraid I'd just tell them what their story was, because I made them tell, what are the facts behind it? Did you see the story behind the story? And by the end of the school year, they were vying to be the one that I would talk to every day. I got a news. You got to let me read this one to you. And they understood it. If you looked across our country now, the failure is not in the news. The failure is in the education. We're not educating the kids to even care about or know how to get it or how to analyze it. So until you change that, we're doing a good job of maybe trying to get the knowledge out there. But if they're not listening to it and they're driving in their car to work one day, they got to get there, they're late. They might listen to some rap or some music, but they're not listening to news programs. They're going to work, doing their job, on the way home, stop, get a beer. So I'm just saying, we better focus on the young people. You got to do that, because if you don't, the 15 or 20% of us that really care about news every day, that doesn't count. What about the 85% that don't, excuse my language, give a shit? Because we don't tell them the real world. We don't talk to them about it. We don't bring these issues up young enough. And I promise you, every kid that's been through that class, their parents will tell you they've never talked to their parents about a single thing in a single class they've ever had in high school. When you started into this, every day they were telling you, can't, you know what we learned today, what we talked about? I mean, they get excited about it. They're sponges. But if you don't provide the water, the sponge doesn't absorb it. And that's all I'm saying. If you really want to make a dent in this world, in this country, about how they look at the news, teach the kids early. If you don't, I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen.
Hear you.
Layne, I'd like to comment on that, because what he's saying is not just academic or what's going on in classroom. It's got real world consequences. Today, we will probably have one of our subscribers to the Arkansas Democrat Gazette die. An older person that loves the newspaper, reads it every day, and we've got to replace that subscriber with a younger person. And most young people are not reading newspapers. And so it's having a consequence where we're losing newspapers all over America, the kind that are so important to report what happens at the city council meetings and the school board meetings and the planning commission meetings and the state board of education, et cetera. So anyway, what you're saying, I think, is so important because of the real world consequences.
I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the continuing education objective that we're looking at and working with from a standpoint of.
Yeah, well, as Rufus has explained, we've got a lot of different initiatives. We can't just give awards. We've got to do other things to try to regain trust. One of the things we want to do is, well, I'll tell you kind of what prompted this. I guess about 6-7 years ago, I went to the New York Times and I had lunch with Arthur Sulzberger, who was the publisher then. And I showed him these core values that we just started publishing in our newspaper. And so he said, let me take you on a tour of our newsroom. And I said, sure. So we went through and he said, we have 1,700 news people in our newsroom today, journalists. It's the most ever in the history of the New York Times. I said, wow, Arthur, that's something. Where'd you hire all these people? He said, oh, well, we get them from BuzzFeed and Huffington Post and places like that. And I thought, well, I know enough about the New York Times that your business model used to be hire the very best reporter at the Louisville Courier-Journal or the Des Moines Register or maybe the Clarion Ledger in Jackson. Hey, we don't do that anymore. And I said, well, really, why don't you do that anymore? He said, we want people with digital skills. Well, let me tell you, they've got some people with great digital skills, but a lot of those people don't know much about journalism. They don't know much about the history of American journalism, about some of the great journalists, maybe about the journalists that covered the civil rights movement. And so we want to try to help educate those people that are in newsrooms today. And we're talking with different universities about putting together a curriculum, maybe a 50-minute class. And maybe we'll talk about different people in journalism in America and how their values and their commitment really made a difference. And so an example of that, we want to do a class on Walter Lippmann. And so Walter Lippmann was, a great intellectual and a great journalist, and lived about 100 years ago. And so on this question of objectivity, it was interesting. Walter Lippmann agreed with some of the critics of objectivity today. He said, no one can be objective, obviously. Everyone's got their own biases, including news reporters and news editors. But there should be an objective method to reporting the news. You always separate news and opinion. You always get both sides. You always approach a story with a humility to realize there's probably there's more you don't know than you do know. And so there's certain standards to follow as a reporter to do it objectively, even though you personally can't be completely objective. So anyway, I think it's interesting. On Monday, Rufus and I are going to meet with someone at the New York Times and have lunch with him. This is a person they've hired to develop a curriculum at the New York Times to address this very issue with the people that work there. So I see rays of hope, and anyway, that's something we have not really gotten off the ground, but it's an initiative we're working on.
Gentlemen, you're advocating for impartiality, show both sides of the story. In the early 1980s, there was a student here who sang in my choir. His name is Shepard Smith. Shepard was a pretty good bass. He was a better journalist. He rose through the ranks, ended up at Fox News, anchoring their legitimate news segments, which you can understand they hid outside of prime time. Shepard was objective. He did a great job, I thought. But he told me one day, he said, Dr. J, in our opinion side, our entertainment side, they lie at least 10% of the time. I feel like I'm going to have to leave this organization. So he did. And he went to CNBC, and after his time there ended, you didn't hear much from Shepard. You still don't hear anything from Shepard. And so I said, Shepard, what's going on? He said, Dr. J, everybody wants me to present both sides, but sometimes there's only one side. What do you do when one side is factual, the other side is spin? When one side tells the truth and the other side is lies?
I think you got a good. We've had conversations about this before. We always have to say that we're not a media critic organization, but we like to collaborate. But Walter's given a story about that exact same analogy that you had, Jerry. So I'll let you share that with him, Walter.
I'm not sure if this is the right story, but no, I think it's important. You know, if someone's lying, you need to tell what they say, and then at least people will maybe know they're lying. If you don't report what they're saying, well, I don't you know, how are people going to know? I mean, when people say something outrageous, should we not report that? Well, if we report it, then people will know it's outrageous. So I do think it's important still to tell both sides. I have a lot of confidence in the reader, in the viewer, in the listener, to be able to tell what they think the truth is and figure out what the truth is. But the best way to do that is to give both sides or all sides. Sometimes there's more than two sides. That's not the story, I don't think.
No, it is indeed.
I think we have time for one more question, and I think I saw a hand over here earlier.
No, that's fine.
And I objectively want to state it's cold in here. So, so my question for Mr. Friday, in that Cronkite report about going beyond objectivity, what was suggested that replace it, and what was their point of advocacy? What they were advocating for do for journalism that objectivity does not?
I'm going to save my comment for last, but there was one individual that wrote a guest op-ed piece immediately after that study came out, Beyond Objectivity, that got published in the New York Times. And that distinguished gentleman that wrote Beyond, why he thought that the study had some challenges with it. You want to share a little bit about your?
Yeah, that was Brett Stevens that wrote about that and talked about how I think he said if the media wanted to shoot themselves in the foot, they couldn't have done a better job than that study. But so the question about objectivity, I think to address your question, I was teaching a class in media ethics at the journalism school in North Carolina, and a student asked me, said, well, give me an example of objectivity. And I said, okay, I'll give you an example. We have a city hall reporter in Little Rock, and basically he got wind of a story that the city was going to buy a building for $460,000. And so he got a reporter and went out and took a picture of this building. This building looked like it was about to fall in. And so he started asking questions, which is what every good reporter does. And he said, so who are you buying this building from? Well, they kind of hemmed and hawed and didn't really want to answer, but he finally got the answer, and it turned out it was a city employee they were buying the building from. So he followed up with another question. He said, well, let me ask you, do you have any appraisals on that building? Oh boy, now a lot of hemming and hawing and really, well, basically just not answering the question. And so, great, we have a freedom of information law in Arkansas. You have one in Mississippi too. So he used that. Turns out they had two appraisals. They had one for 65,000 and one for 85,000, and they're going to pay 460,000. And so basically that was the end of the city trying to buy that building. That's the importance of having reporters out there. And so the student asked me a good question. He said, well, that's a really interesting story and that's commendable, but what does that have to do with objectivity? And I said, let me tell you what it has to do with objectivity. That reporter, I don't know if he votes Democrat, if he votes Republican. I don't know if he's liberal. I don't know if he's conservative. And you know what? I don't care because our readers don't know either. So he checks his political persuasions or ideology, and he just reports the facts and lets the readers make their decisions. So to me, that's a great sign of objectivity.
Thank you. And I'd like to add one thing about educating children to read newspapers. I was born and raised in Brooklyn when there were so many newspapers, the Journal American, the Telegram, the Post, on and on and on, that my father actually would teach me how to read a newspaper. We got the Journal American and I would read it because it had great comics. And my father pulled me aside and said, okay, this is the opinion page. This is the report page, and it taught me. And so I would say, if you want to get kids to start reading newspapers again, put the comics back.
And on that happy note, thank you very much, Walter, Rufus. This was fantastic, very enlightening. And it also demonstrates that just talking about objectivity itself can be controversial, and people have different opinions on that. And yes, very astute, objective observation that it is a little cold in the room. I think the temperature is set to accommodate the 300 people that we expect in here for lunch today. So bear with us. We'll give you another 5-minute break now to warm up, get some more caffeine, and we'll be back here with a very exciting panel with some real journalistic heavyweights in 5 minutes. Thank you.